Let's go. Wowzers. I think I've actually gone live without a full fanfare going on. So yeah, welcome everybody. So I am back in the UK, so I don't have I'm back to the normal backdrop here and the cold temperatures, you'll be glad to know. So, but anyway, enough of that. So welcome everybody. I guess the thing for me, this is, really an ongoing conversation, and it's very much that thing of something gets said in the room, which we all acknowledge wasn't quite right, and then something else happens, and then like literally nothing happens, nothing gets said, and just the conversation moves on. The meeting continues. I mean, it could be a meeting, it could be anything. The WhatsApp thread carries on, and not because everybody's acknowledged what's actually gone on, but just actually stepping forward actually feels like it could be quite costly. And that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, isn't it? It's that line, that line that, invisible as it is, that do we cross over it? Do we not cross over it? And obviously last month we talked about, what happens when men go quiet, and, actually this is the conversation that happens before that, the moment just before that decision is made. So as usual, I am joined by you're the three musketeers, really, aren't you? Who've been brave enough to step into this space and join me with this conversation. So
I wish I had the long flowing locks and the beard, though, to look like a musketeer.
I don't know, but I can cut some of mine, Dan, send it up to you.
I've always wanted to have like Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen style, like really long black wavy hair. This is what
excellent. Sounds perfect.
I have some old pictures.
I don't know. So I'm going to throw it to you. Have you guys ever noticed, a moment where, you've observed, not necessarily publicly, but a moment where there's been a line, you've observed somewhere where, do I say something? Do I not say something? I don't know. Definitely.
Yeah, I've literally been in that situation, Laura. I've literally been in it where I've been with a group of men. I can picture it now. It was at work. One of the guys there was a little bit old school and dropped in a joke, which made us all go, ooh. And we all moved swiftly on and continued with the conversation and changed the subject. Nobody said a word. Nobody said, hang on, mate, I'm not sure about that. I don't think that's acceptable. Or even ask that question, Laura, like I said on your post earlier, like, what exactly do you mean by that? Just, hold the mirror up and go, do you realize what you're doing there? Like, and you could tell it landed badly. It didn't get the laugh he thought it was going to get. We weren't rolling about laugh. A couple of us sort of chortled. Most of us were a little bit awkward, and then we just moved the conversation on. Nobody actually did that thing again. Well, that was uncomfortable. I didn't like that. I don't know whether anybody spoke to him afterwards. But yeah, I've literally been in that situation, Laura. And you do the mind kicks in then, and you're like, right, what can I do? What should I do? Should I say something? Can I just let this slide? What happens if I don't do anything? What happens if I do let this slide? What happens now if I make this a confrontation? Am I going to be the one ostracized? Am I going to be the one laughed at and ridiculed? Am I going to be the one left out of the circle? Are people now going to be wary of what they say around me? All this stuff started going through my head. I remember it well. And I like to think now, a few years, this is about 5-6 years ago, I think now I would behave differently. I like to think I would have said something.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because in what you've just described, it's that underlying thing about fitting in. And I'll come back to that a bit later because it's something I've been reading into and listening over the last couple of days. But I know, Matt, what about you? I mean, this line, this sort of invisible line that is there, but do we cross it? What's your experience of it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my mind jumps to one or two WhatsApp groups that I'm in with the lads, either football team or, different group. And yeah, I can think of times, many, many times where that line was crossed. I don't know if it's a reflection on society these days or my age group now or what it is. I'm noticing I'm in that situation a lot less than I was. Certainly, I mean, I imagine it still goes on, but I'm not seeing it as much. But it's been something that, yeah, like Dan, I've got plenty of examples of. And same thing. I mean, the reaction in a WhatsApp group, you get some people putting up laughing emojis and like, ha, and then you get complete silence. And I think if I reflect back, honestly, there's probably some times where I put the laughing emoji up without really thinking what the context, what the bigger picture was. And then definitely plenty of times where I just went silent and thought, I don't want to engage with that. But equally, I don't want to be seen to be criticizing or, as you said, then potentially ostracizing myself from this group. So I'll just stay quiet.
It's very interesting how not saying yes is also not saying no.
Absolutely.
And that was exactly what I was thinking, Mark. It's really that point, isn't it?
Yeah, look at the example of this very thing. Now, just to be clear, no different to Matt and Dan in these situations too. WhatsApp groups left, right, and centre. Like even there was a piece a few weeks ago, and I should have called someone out on something, and I didn't. I was very locker room. Is that the right term for that kind of language? But you look at what happened when the American ice hockey team won the gold medal, and Donald Trump rang them up and said about inviting them to the White House, and then made a joke about having to invite the women as well, or he'll get in trouble. The women who had already won the gold medal, he completely dismissed their achievements and their abilities, and he laughed at them instead. What was really interesting was that two of the players on the team, their mother was one of the coaches for the women's team and was a former women's international hockey player. But it kind of struck me that, to your point there, Matt, about you laugh. So often, the thing is said and we laugh because, the context isn't quite the same thing, but it's very hard afterwards to go, well, actually, maybe that wasn't funny and I shouldn't laugh. But in a situation, the president of the USA is on the phone, you're not going to challenge him about that kind of thing, but that's just an example in the public realm of the same thing happening. And I saw a lot of people come online afterwards saying well, that just wasn't right, and they're right, it wasn't right, but it was very difficult to call out in the space and in the time. But they could have called out afterwards and said, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
And you make a really good point, because I think just even listening to all three of you speak, and I'm thinking, is that just a male thing, or is it something that actually anybody can get caught in the context of the moment, and only afterwards, when you think back and go, to Matt's point, where if I put my hand up, honestly, I probably put a laughing emoji and then thought afterwards about, was that the right thing? Or Dan saying, when I step back and maybe I should have called something out. Is that true of human nature generally?
Yeah.
Where when you're caught in that moment, you're almost running with it, and actually it's only with that wonderful thing called hindsight that actually we re-review the wider context. And so it's kind of really got me thinking then about, is it just really the sort of underlying piece around human desire to fit in, to belong, and therefore, and equally, I think there's another part that goes with it, is we all have our own lives beyond each of these WhatsApp groups, rooms that we sit in and all the rest of it, which have a whole load of stress. So in that moment, do we sometimes, and I'm not necessarily excusing it, but do sometimes we just go in the grand list of all the problems that I have right now on my list, actually stepping in to call somebody out where I haven't really got time, whether they're going to give me a whole backlash or not. I've got to let it ride. Now, I'm not saying that is, the right response, but you can understand how it happens, I think, in a world that is just at this particular point in time so stressful. But I guess that is the double-edged sword, isn't it? There's a risk and
yeah. I mean, I would sort of point to that old trope of change only happens when the pain of remaining the same outweighs that of the change itself.
Yeah.
And I think if I reflect back when I have seen people stepping in, often in my experience, that has been led by women who I would guess either directly or indirectly have seen the pain of not calling that out, have seen how things can then progress and develop, and knows that needs to happen. Whereas, let's be honest, we as men are less likely to personally experience that, and so perhaps don't have that context of the pain of where it can go. And so then therefore we stay in our safer place. I won't make a comment because it's not causing me too much direct pain at the moment not to. So I'll stay where I am. Thank you very much. And I think therefore I think you're absolutely right. It's that kind of human nature element that you want to belong. You don't want to potentially ostracize yourself. You don't want to run those risks. And so the pain of saying something is quite possibly going to outweigh that of staying the same.
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting situation. So what would make it then, what is the thing that would make you step over that point? Because I think, as I bombarded you all this afternoon, I've been sitting here doing a bit of research this afternoon, and it's actually really fascinating. But listening to young voices, and I started reading some of the work from Dr. Sophie King-Hill from Birmingham University, and she talks about, there's a crisis of masculinity, I think is exactly how she phrases it. And it you then heard some young men talking about how they got into gangs and why they get into gangs, and it's because they're struggling to know a place that they can fit in and that they can belong. Now, this is obviously a far more extreme end of the spectrum here, but that is the reality, is that here is men and young men who don't feel like they fit in. They haven't even found the WhatsApp group to even, have the banter. They found it in other places to fit in. And so they are feeling the pain. They clearly are, because they're going out to find solutions. So how is that different? And I guess that's where I was heading to with there's two ends of a conundrum here, of the spectrum. I don't know what is quite the right word. But what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, the fitting in and the belonging is a human thing, isn't it? That's not gendered. It's hardwired in us, right? We have a fear of rejection because we're wired for the Stone Age, and in the Stone Age, if the tribe rejected us, we were dead. We'd get eaten by a wolf, or we'd get killed by another tribe. So we have a deep inner fear of rejection. We don't like it. We want to belong. We want to fit in, and this is why so many of us bend ourselves out of shape to try and fit in, right? And yeah, so we've now got a generation of boys, because of the message they're receiving, which is overtly negative about men. And I understand why we receive that message, because of the nature of where our culture has brought us to, from the way we've been in the last, half century, hundreds of years, maybe even. But it's not their fault. They didn't choose it. They didn't create this world. They didn't create patriarchy. They haven't oppressed women, and they're growing up being told they've got to apologize for it. And no wonder they feel ostracized and like they don't fit in. They don't know what the world wants from them. They're getting very confused messages about what the world wants from men. It's hard enough for crusty old blokes like us three to work it out, let alone youngsters who have no point of reference and no understanding of all these things like we do. And what we're then doing is we're pushing them underground to seek their tribe, their way of fitting in, seeing themselves, getting recognized, being validated and approved, all these things we want as humans. And they're finding very unhealthy messages and groups, which are telling them to fight back in some ways, right? Telling them to form this version of masculinity in order to dominate, right? Which is just completely unhelpful, because, as you always say, Laura, right, we're better together, and we're only going to do anything about this once we all step into the arena. Now, with the fitting, with that, the painting that Matt talked about there, right? How much of a priority is it for us now? How much do we no longer want our wives, our daughters, our sisters, our mothers, our female colleagues and friends to be put in these positions, to be treated as other, as Donald Trump did, to the women's ice hockey team? How much of a priority is it for us to change that, right? We need to feel that pain. We need to step into it. It's really difficult for us as men because we don't know what it's like, but we've got to try. We've got to endeavor to put ourselves in the shoes of women, especially the women close to us, because that's the easiest connection for us, and decide, is this now a priority for us? Is this something we no longer want in our world? And if so, that means the pain for us now of staying the same outweighs, it means we want to change, which means then it is a priority to say something in the WhatsApp group, even if it's to say something privately, or to publicly state, I am not buying into this. I am saying no to this very clearly. I don't want to fall out with the people here. I just do not agree with this, because I've got to a point now where the pain of staying the same is outweighed by the pain. No, it's the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah. We know what you're trying to say.
You know what I mean, right? We've got to, right? We've got to get ourselves to that place. Because we don't want this world, Laura, do we? None of us sat here want this world. We want it to change, and we can't just keep pointing the fingers and waiting for some other sod to sort it out. We've got to step up and step in and start really looking at ourselves, about these lines, and they're imaginary and they're unseen. But we've all been there, and we've all stepped back from them. We've got to make a real conscious choice now to step in and step over them. And we've got to be smart about how we do that. I don't think we need to be causing fights and aggression and conflict and division. Blimey, we've got enough of that in the world right now, right? But we can't, we just cannot carry on like this, right? And it's not me, it's not all men, it doesn't wash. We've got to.
And I get that point. I'm going to kind of, just going to bring Julia's point here, because I think it kind of goes back to part of what Matt and Mark were saying as well. I think perhaps men risk potentially big consequence by speaking up, and I think that's true. And I guess Mark, Matt, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
I don't think it's true. I think it's
or is
true.
It something that we tell ourselves that
I think it's true that we have consequences, but I don't think it's true that, it's interesting how it's cultural conditioning, right? So it's terrible for us to experience that by speaking up, right? Whereas women will experience that in language and in commentary for their entire lives. you know, where we won't experience that at all. And that's what I mean by I don't think it's true. And it's very interesting because I put a couple of posts in the last while, one for International Women's Day and one for this today. And some people pointed me to some other stuff about commentary that they've received. And like, it's insidious, you know, comments on stuff. And it's not even like on my Instagram, I follow people. I saw people putting up comments, and they've actually started to put up the person, and this is the profile of the person who made this comment. You know, away you go. So suddenly people are laying into that profile of this person for making that comment. You know, which is absolutely fair. You know, that's the kind of ostracization we want to happen for someone who does that. Like, I think I agree that there is a risk in it for us, right? But then does that risk of giving away of yourself? You know, it strikes me, and I wonder, would I think the same if I had sons as opposed to daughters? But I have daughters, and because I have daughters, I look at the world and I go, this is not right. I never looked at the world before that and thought this wasn't right. Why didn't I though? I had a mother, I had a sister, I had friends, I had a partner, I had a wife. Why didn't I? Why is it that it's daughters that made me look at this? And maybe it's a maturity thing. Maybe look at this and go, this isn't right. Like, why are we allowing this to happen? You know, and it's like, you know, and what I mean by the culture thing, like, you know, you look at it's boys will be boys, or, you know, or boys don't cry, and all this other cultural language that is around it, right? But there's no girls will be girls. Where does that fit? You know, those kind of pieces. So, like, I don't want to see my daughters have to hide their light under a bushel for their entire lives for fear of what commentary will come back at them, because it will, because that's the culture and society we've built around it. Whereas if we put our head above the parapet, once we may get support, we may get rejected by a group. But if women do it at any occasion, it can happen. And I think that's the difference, where it's not so hard for us in our own way. It's just that we need a little bit of courage and a bit of bravery to actually stand up for what we believe in.
And that's a good point, because where I'm going to, and I'm going to ask Matt for his thoughts too. But because I think you're absolutely right, Mark. But Matt, I don't know, what are your thoughts? You know, kind of going back to this, you know, this pain point, and I think, you know, Robert here is kind of written, nothing will change until the status quo is more painful than
that's what I was trying to say, Robert. Thank you, Robert. That's what I was trying to say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, hey, I've similar to what Mark's just said, I've got skin in the game now. I mean, I came from a country where this isn't really a question. I lived in Dubai for 16 years. So, you know, no, I didn't. I lived in Hong Kong. What am I on about?
Crusty old man, Matt. Crusty old man, Matt. That's what Daniel called us, and he's right.
I lived in Hong Kong for 16 years, and I felt absolutely fine and safe if my wife was walking home from the theatre, from a night out, from whatever. Sometimes she might choose to get a taxi because it was too long a walk. But if she didn't, if she decided to walk and she was on her own, I was fine with that, because that was that environment. And then I've come back into the UK environment, and I've had to really switch my thinking. Suddenly I've seen a different reaction from my wife. Suddenly there's this whole conversation about, well, I'm not going in the park after dark. That's not happening. And my initial reaction, having come from the sort of Hong Kong environment for so long, is, why? What do you think is going to happen? But then just listening and understanding more. And then, as Mark absolutely says, now I've got skin in the game. Now I've got a 9-year-old daughter who, you know, amazes me and terrifies me in equal measure. And then, you know, I hear from mums of older girls who experience on a daily basis their girls experiencing catcalls and, you know, dodgy shouts on the street every single day. And I don't want that for my daughter. And I think now, unless I do get involved in this conversation, I don't really have answers at this point, but I guess unless I get involved in the conversation, unless I put my head above the parapet when unfortunately the opportunity presents itself, I'm not going to change the current status quo, which terrifies me when I think about that 9-year-old girl, my daughter. So, yeah.
and I think I think that's it. And I don't know. I suppose the place I've gone to is so if we want to bring about, there's a couple of things that are going through my curly whirly brain, but if we want to bring about change, much to Robert's point, is it just that the pain has to be bad enough for you guys to make a change, or is it actually there is nothing, there is actually this crisis of masculinity. There is no real good role models out there for men to look up to. So when you don't have something to, as one of the youngsters in this Ross Kemp Lost Boys, Deadly Men program said, and it was repeated in various different guises by the young men in the program. So basically saying, we've got all this information coming at us from everybody, and actually there's so much, but we still don't actually have really good role models. And I think it goes back to Robert's point here, where he says, I'd love to teach men professional and personal tools and habits for high discipline, empathy, self-esteem, etc. And where are those? Who is showing those actively in senior leaderships, in public spaces? You can very easily see why influencers who seem like they have it all together, and I quote you one of the influencers, it wasn't Andrew Tate, but there was a very strong, decent looking guy, and his line basically went, to be successful, a man needs to be fit, savvy with business, and have women, was literally how he said it to the camera. And I just sat there going, well, is that the world's answer to, how a man should get on? And they sort of kind of go on and basically say, yes, those influencers are unhelpful, but they're filling this huge vacuum. So they're not per se the problem. It's just there is this vacuum of a lack of role models. So when you haven't got something to look to, you're kind of busy scrabbling, and it's kind of a bit like, well, where do I look? Where do I go? Too much to the comments that are being made. So I'm wondering, is it just because the pain hasn't got bad enough to make the change, or is it because actually we don't know what we're looking for, so therefore it becomes easier?
I think that's where you've nailed it. What does a good role model look like, Laura? I think there are thousands of them out there.
Yeah.
Tons and tons and tons. Does the algorithm like them on Instagram and TikTok? No. I gave up on TikTok. My message about positive masculinity got me nowhere. I was on there for almost a year. I got sod all followers. So lots of people would encourage me, get on there, Dan, get on there, talk about positive masculinity, talk about your views about men and everything. You'll go down a storm. I thought, great, I'll do that. I spent hundreds of pounds getting help, learning how to do TikTok, learning how to use it. Did the algorithm have any interest in my views on masculinity? No, none. No take up, no followers, no comments. And, some of my videos would do well. I'd get tens of thousands of views, but very, very little in the way of conversation coming out the back of it. So there are plenty of male role models. Are we doing enough to promote them? Are we doing enough to connect them to these young lads? Probably not. What are these young lads looking for in terms of something to get hold of? That the message peddled by the influence that you talk of there, Laura, is easy. It's an easy message. It's an easy life. Just force people to your way of thinking. Oh, great. Yeah, I do that. That's nice and easy. It means I don't have to interact with people. It means I don't have to, compromise, find middle ground. I don't have to understand anybody else's point of view. I don't have to empathize. I just force everyone to my way of thinking. I get myself fit and strong so people see a threat of violence and I'll just force them into that's nice and easy. Love that. And then all these stupid things they peddle about women and how women operate, this 80-20 rubbish that's all over the internet. And these young lads are they're buying it like it's real. Like, I watched that Ross Kemp thing as well. And that the first episode about incels. And these young lads, these way they think life is, right? Oh, women are shallow and obsessed by looks. It's like, have you met women? Like, really? That's not what women are like, mate. 80% of them go for the top 20% of men. No, they don't. And by whose measure is this 20% anyway? Like, there's so much rubbish and easy answers peddled. It's really difficult, right? Because the right answer is nuanced. It's grey area.
Agreed.
Difficult. It needs conversation. It doesn't fit into 140 characters and sound bites, right? This is the trouble. It's not that there aren't the role models. It's the world we live in does not give them visibility.
And is it interesting? Like, you know, I would read an awful lot, and one of my favorite book is probably a book called Gilead, and it's a book about a good man, and it's the most difficult thing to write about someone who is good, because how interesting is someone who is good? You know, how interesting are they really? They don't have all these scans in the closet. They don't have all these stupid things. They don't, you know, they don't do these things. They just try to live a good life in a good way and make mistakes, or honest mistakes, and then assess the mistakes they've made and realize where they can do better. That's just being good. But it's not very interesting being good. And that's a part of it too. I think even Robert mentioned it there about the monetization of positive role models, because it's very hard to do. It is very hard to do, because it's not that interesting. You know, I've lived this really good, calm, good life, respectful of all other people. Great. But you know, can I also drive fast cars, and can I also do all these other wonderful things? Like, it's a challenge in that regard. If I'm young, how does that appeal to me? How does that appeal to me? And maybe if we realize, and that's the piece that's missing in tying that together, is we don't realize how strong that is to be. We don't realize that the man who can live a good life in line with the values and treat people right is a very, very courageous and brave and strong man. Mm. We don't see that aspect of it. We don't see that's strength. We don't realize the strength that's in that.
And I think you're so right, Mark. I think there's not enough value put on that role model. And I'm going to kind of loop in on a couple of comments that have been made, because I think it ties in with something that I know Matt has talked about before, but also ties into conversations that we've had. And I think it goes back to this line piece. And Julia sort of says here, it's very hard for young adult men to stand up to protect their female friends against misogyny. Now, I'm going to throw it here, because we have talked before about, is it really the role of a man to protect a woman? And now we've had this conversation, and I think there's part of me that instantly went to a space of thinking of Professor Fiona Vera Gray and the safety work that women do. And, you know, that we're always checking and everything. And actually, the reason why I thought of you, Matt, was your example of at school, and the boys were being a bit mischievous and pulling the girls' skirts down. And the message that came out from the school was not for the boys to be reprimanded, but actually the girls were to wear their, cycling shorts or whatever it is they have to wear underneath their skirts. And I guess, Mark, you talked about, needing to protect our women. And so I guess, that for me comes back to a line. At what point do we say, actually, we should be doing that? I do, I hear what Julia is saying with regards to, there's a lot of peer pressure, and what young men say in a group versus what they say behind closed doors isn't necessarily always the same thing. However, interestingly, a conversation I had yesterday, I was told actually the girls are feeling pretty damn confident right now. It's the boys who actually are sort of stepping back. But Matt, I'm going to give you your thoughts. I know you've shared your experiences before with this. Kind of at what point do we have to actually challenge the slightly harder bit, which is we have to tackle men rather than get women to
I mean, I'd love to say it's a very, very simple thing for me. If a woman has to adapt her behavior rather than men confront that maybe what they're saying isn't right, that for me is the line. Like, if you know, and you see these messages coming through in the media all the time, to your point earlier, like you see instances where a woman's been murdered and the reporting of it is woman murdered after night out. And it's like, well, what does the fact that it's after a night out have to do with it? You know, are you suggesting that there was something in her behavior on that night out that made her vulnerable and that's her fault? You know, like, it's got bugger all to do with it. You know, it's like, if there's any sense that a woman has to modify or adapt the way she lives normally, then that's not right. That's not right.
And I think that is the key thing, isn't it?
However, we are so far away from that.
Yeah.
Because you listen to the women in your life, and there's a daily, almost hourly adaptation to their behavior to keep themselves safe.
And you know, and I think that's it. And I mean, I still go back to Fiona's comments when I did a session with her, and she said, you know, she spent 2 weeks talking to young women, and they kept saying, no, I don't do, there's no safety work, I don't do anything. And she said, okay, for the next 2 weeks afterwards, I want you to, you know, record everything you do. And it becomes so ingrained that they didn't even realize they were doing. She said, well, that's safety work, you know, that's safety work. And they were just going, all this I've been doing, you know, subconsciously, because it's so ingrained. And so you've got all of that to unpick. And I guess that, you know, obviously, you know, the theme of tonight's conversation was around the line, and I know we've kind of talked lots around it, but I think it's because it's actually, it's in that space where it's not, the line is quite fuzzy. If that makes any kind of sense in this, because it's, everybody has, you know, we are stronger together. That's the thing. The solution is only going to come about because everybody recognizes they have a role to play in recognizing where that line is, what is and isn't one side or other side, and then doing something about it, not just simply going, there is a line. And I guess that's, you know, the piece, isn't it? But what do you think is one of the most pressing things that we can do? You think, you know, that, or is it just those little changes in every single day that,
I think that's what it has to be, Laura, doesn't it? It has to be small incremental changes that we all take on, because at the end of the day, right, what are we all trying to achieve here? What do we want from this? We, you know, as humans, we want harmony, we want happiness, we want peace of mind, don't we? Right. So if that's what we're trying to achieve, it means we've got to change the way things are, because half of the population aren't able to have that because they're constantly scared for their safety. We don't want that world, do we? We don't want that. Nobody wants that, right? So what little things can we do as men and women together on our own to make this change? It's going to be incremental. It's not going to happen overnight. One, we can be prepared to have these conversations, right? Two, we've got to listen. Men have got to listen to women. Women have got to listen to men. We've got to listen to our youngsters. We've got to stop making assumptions. We've got to stop shutting people down. We've got to stop this whole "it's not me, gov" business, right? The world belongs to all of us. We all have a responsibility. We all have a personal responsibility. What sort of world do we want? What do we believe is and isn't acceptable anymore? What are we prepared to tolerate? How are we going to make change? What can we do ourselves? Something even minuscule every day. Micro things which are going to change this culture in the way we talk, in the way we relate to other people, right? And we've got to get into our youngsters now and listen to them, not tell them what to do, not beat them over the head, not blame them for the last 50 years of culture. Actually listen to them and their perspective and their experience, right? And give them a voice, give them a sense of belonging, and set that example. We're so flipping divided. We're all busy shouting and screaming at each other and pointing fingers and saying this one's wrong and that one's wrong. When are we going to take some personal responsibility for the nature of things? Stop waiting for some other sod to sort it out. We've got to do something together, even if it's tiny. You know, we've got to say, no, that word isn't acceptable anymore. No, I don't want you talking about women like that in my presence. I don't want it. Stop it. Because this is the world it creates. And we don't want this world.
No, I'm with you, Dan. I'm just going to bring in a couple of points before I bring Matt and Mark back in. But Robert's saying here, you know, you're absolutely right. You know, the phrase on the tube is see it, say it, sort it. And it is everyone's job. And I, you know, as I say, the answer to everything is all of us, and we're stronger together is pretty much what I say. And because I do think it is, you know, that's why this conversation came up. You know, it was to get this conversation started. And Charles has shared this question, and I have to, why is safety gender bias?
Oh God, you got another half hour.
I think that one we might make a whole session on it.
Next one. Yeah, next one. Charles, tune into the next one, mate. We will look at this because there is not a simple one sentence answer to that question.
So Charles, you can hold us to that. But I think it's a good one because, you know, part of some of this conversation has been about the fact that actually about belonging, fitting in, that's part of the human experience. And why are we saying it should belong to either other? But yeah, I mean,
just on something, Laura, when that piece around will make safety everyone's job, and you know about that kind of fitting in, I think society is very interesting in how it has evolved in certain ways over the last 20 to 30 years, and that's come through probably the school systems, come through the youth system. You know, I'd look at my youngest daughter, and she's autistic, but you know, she's not ostracized because of that, right? And like, she wouldn't pick out other kids because of how they are. There's a complete acceptance of how people are and what people need. And even to the point of, there's a hotel I would meet clients in, and during the early mornings, they have people working and serving the tables who are clearly very high on the spectrum, and they're providing a level of employment. And the first time you're dealing with this person, you're like, okay, this is not a normal waiter kind of, you know, customer interaction. Then you realize, oh, that's actually what's going on here, you know. And there's no instruction, there's no, oh, these people will be working, nothing like that. It's up to you as the person to understand the situation you now find yourself in and accept it and deal with it for that situation. And it's very interesting how culturally, because we make it the norm, it just changes itself with it, because we make it what's right. And like it's that point of it being everyone's job. As we make it, as we push it out, it becomes the norm. And then the people who are saying and doing the things that aren't right stand out. And they stand out very obviously and go, wait a second now here. And then we can all call it out together in the right way.
And you're so right, Mark. You know, I think we set up all these sort of, I suppose the world where I've gone to in my mind, we're so busy dividing everybody and trying to be inclusive that actually all we're doing is actually pushing people further apart. And I think if we can bring people, you know, just accept and meet people where they're at, what difference that makes. I don't know, Matt, your thoughts?
Well, I guess I'm just sort of really echoing what's gone before. In the current climate, we're not going to get any top-down change, that's for sure, because at the top, we've got part of the problem. So it's got to come bottom up. It's got to come from each and every single one of us saying, no, I won't accept this kind of chat or behavior or whatever it is in this, in my kind of sphere, and making that stand. And then, as you say, how doing things like this, being on here, and getting the conversation going, connecting, combining, listening. That's what it's going to take.
And absolutely, and I think we talked in the post earlier on about curiosity, Dan, but I think it is that listening with curiosity. It's recognizing we all have a role to play. There are so many comments coming through so quickly that I can't keep up with trying to hold the truth. So I apologize that but clearly this is a topic that needs to be continued, because otherwise I'm going to have suddenly all of your partners and wives knocking on the doors to your offices going, hello.
Yeah, there's going to be safety for men at issue here, Laura, if we carry on.
Exactly, yeah. But I think, for me, I think it has to start bottom up. It has to start listening. Even if it's just in the immediate conversations at home, so we start to feel a little bit safer, and that's everybody, in order to step forward, so that actually we can cross that line. Because otherwise, if we all accept that line's there, we'll never do it. But it just takes some brave souls.
Just that I've thought about that crossing the line thing. The thing that's really key and really important here, if someone steps up to do that, we've got to back them.
Yeah.
And en masse. When someone does that, don't back away, don't hide, don't shrink and think, oh, I'd rather not. When someone has been brave and courageous and has stepped up and said, this isn't acceptable, I don't want this, but I'm not having that, back them up.
Absolutely. And I think that's it, because that moment that somebody crosses the line, it's very lonely. And that's for anybody. That's just not that's a human being thing.
Doing the right thing is often lonely, Laura. Sorry, Dan, doing the right thing is often lonely. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Matt, any closing reflections before I allow you to your evening?
I think it's just the reflection is this is a conversation that has to keep continuing. Got to keep doing it. Got to keep raising the flag, saying we need this on the table.
Absolutely agree. Thanks as ever, guys, and thank you for those of you who joined us and gave me lots and lots of comments to try and keep up to speed with. But next month, strictly speaking, I think it's about the 16th of April. But I don't know, maybe the 14th of April. Was that a Tuesday? Yeah, 14th of April. But I know that's school holidays time, so we may have to come back to you on the actual date, by virtue of the fact that there are some in this group who have children who will require parental supervision, no doubt. That doesn't include me, and Darren's kid is well and truly old enough to look after himself.
He's got one of his own now, Laura.
Really? Wowzers. So you're a granddad?
Yeah, I'm off down to see him tomorrow.
Oh, how excited. And how old is the little one?
October, November, December, January, February. 5 months old.
Wowzers. Wow. So now it's Granddad Dan.
Yeah.
Tell me that.
That's a book series somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thanks as ever, guys.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Cheers.